Three wealthy suitors stood in her father's parlor, ready to claim her hand. Clara Holden looked them dead in the eye and said, "I can outride and outshoot every man in this room. I play poker with the ranch hands, and I will never pretend to be helpless for any man." They called her too wild, too much, unmarriageable. But that same night, when rustlers surrounded her on the open range, a stranger appeared from the shadows. A man with storm-gray eyes and a rifle that never missed. He should have kept riding. He always did, because everyone who got close to him ended up dead. His name was Elias Crow. And 3 years ago, a powerful man murdered everyone he loved, then made sure the law blamed him for it. Now that man wants Clara's ranch, and he will burn everything she loves to get it. But Clara Holden does not run, and for the first time in 3 years, neither does Elias. This story reminds us that being called too much doesn't mean you need to shrink. It means you haven't found someone strong enough to stand beside you. True partnership isn't about taming someone. It's about two people making each other stronger and facing the world as equals. If you believe the right love should make you more yourself, not less, drop a comment and tell me what you refuse to change for anyone. And if you want more stories about strong women who write their own destiny, subscribe and hit that bell. Your support keeps these stories coming. The late sun bled across the Montana sky, painting the Holden Ranch in hues of orange and gold. Clara stood on the corral fence, watching a stubborn Mustang. That horse was a magnificent creature, with a wild defiance in its eyes that looked right back at Clara from her own mirror. "Miss Clara, your father's asking for you," called Thomas, the old ranch hand. He had a look on his face that said he knew she would not be happy about it. "Tell him I am busy," she said, her eyes never leaving the horse. Her dark hair, which her mother had spent an hour pinning up, had escaped and tumbled down her back. "He says it is important. You have visitors." That got her attention. Visitors usually meant one thing, another suitor her father had found. "What kind of visitors?" Thomas looked uneasy. "The kind that wear fancy city suits, Miss Clara. He has them in the parlor." Clara hopped off the fence. Her dusty riding skirt was considered scandalous by polite society, and there was dirt under her nails. Perfect. The quickest way to send a suitor running was to let him see the real her. "Let them wait," she said, but she started walking toward the big house. It was better to get the whole ordeal over with. The Holden mansion stood like a monument to her father's ambition. Judge Marcus Holden had carved this piece of Montana out of the wilderness with sheer force of will. He believed in order and civilization. His daughter, however, had inherited his strong will, but none of his interest in being civilized. At the back door, Clara splashed water on her face, catching her reflection in the window. She was 22, with her mother's beauty and her father's stubborn jaw. People called her beautiful, but they also called her too independent, too outspoken, and too skilled with a horse and a rifle. Too wild. That was the word her father used. "You are too wild, Clara," he had told her. "You must learn to bend." But Clara was not made for bending. She walked into the kitchen, where Maria, the housekeeper for 15 years, just sighed. "Your mother will not be pleased with how you look." "Mama is never pleased," Clara said with a small smile. "So what kind of fool did he bring home this time?" Maria looked amused. "I believe there are 3 of them, and one brought his mother." "Oh, wonderful," Clara muttered. "A man who needs his mother's help to find a wife." "Your father means well. My father wants to marry me off before I cause more talk." Clara squared her shoulders and walked toward the parlor. The room felt stuffy. 3 men and an older woman in a ridiculous hat all stood when she entered. Her mother, Catherine, shot her a look of pure horror. Judge Marcus Holden, her father, rose. He was an imposing man of 60, and his face was a thundercloud. "Clara," he said, his voice a clear warning, "I would like you to meet Mr. Jonathan Peaton, and his mother, Mrs. Constance Peaton." Also, Mr. Charles Whitmore and Mr. Frederick Hayes. Everyone, this is my daughter, Clara. The men gave clumsy bows. Clara saw their expensive suits and soft hands. They were city men who had never done a day of real work. Gentlemen, she nodded. Mrs. Peaton. My dear, the older woman said with a fake sweetness. You seem to be a very energetic young woman. That was code for wild and unacceptable. Clara just smiled. I was working. The horses, ma'am. It is energetic work. Working? Asked Charles Whitmore, a skinny man who looked confused. Surely you mean watching the men work. No, I mean working, she corrected him. I was training a new Mustang. He is a stubborn animal. A lot like me, I suppose. Jonathan Peaton, a handsome man with blonde hair, stepped forward. Miss Holden, your father has told us all about you. The reality is even more than I expected. I bet it is, Clara said, moving away from them. I suspect what my father described and what you are seeing are two very different things. Clara, please, her mother pleaded, come and sit down. I am fine standing, Mama. I have been on a horse all day. She leaned against the window frame, which earned her a sharp look of disapproval from Mrs. Peaton. So, gentlemen, what brings you all the way out here? My father must have told you we are miles from anything you would call civilization. Frederick Hayes, a man with cold, calculating eyes, spoke up. Your father spoke of business opportunities, land, mining. A man looking to build something out here needs a proper wife. Is that what I am? A convenience? Clara's voice was sharp. Clara, her father boomed. That is enough. Is it? She shot back, turning to the suitors. Let us just be honest. You are all here looking for a wife. My father is looking for a son-in-law, and I am looking to end this little show as quickly as possible, so allow me to save you all some time. She stood in the middle of the room, straight and proud. I run this ranch. It is not a hobby, it is my life's work. I can ride and shoot better than most men I know. I manage the finances, the crew, and the livestock. I do not attend parties, and I have no plans to change for any man. The room was dead silent. Furthermore, she continued, I believe women should be allowed to vote. I think the way the native tribes are treated is a national disgrace. And yes, I play poker with the ranch hands. I speak my mind, and I will not pretend to be some helpless little flower. Mrs. Peaton looked like she was about to faint. The other men looked angry or disgusted. Only Jonathan Peaton seemed amused. Every spirited horse needs a firm hand to guide it, he said with a smug smile. I am not a horse you can break, Mr. Peaton, Clara said, her voice turning to ice. And any man who thinks he needs to guide me can see himself out of my home. That is enough, her father roared, his face beet red with rage. You will apologize, Clara. I will not, she said, facing him down. The two of them stood locked in a battle of wills that had been brewing for years. I will not apologize for the truth. If you want me to marry one of these men, fine. But they deserve to know exactly who they are getting. What they are getting, said Frederick Hayes coldly as he stood up, is a problem. That woman is a wildcat with no respect for her betters. No dowry is worth that kind of trouble, Judge Holden. He stormed out with Charles Whitmore scurrying behind him like a spooked jackrabbit, mumbling apologies. Mrs. Peaton stood up tall, her face a perfect picture of high society offense. Jonathan, we are leaving this instant. This young lady is clearly not fit for a man of your position. But Jonathan Peaton just stood there, smiling that unsettling smile at Clara. On the contrary, Mother, I find Miss Holden refreshingly spirited. All she needs is a firm hand to guide her. No. Clara's voice was cold as a river stone. What I need is to be left alone to live my own life. But I thank you for making it plain you see me as a horse to be broken, not a person to be respected. Now you best follow your mother. Something ugly flashed in Peaton's eyes, but he kept that smile plastered on his face. This is not over, Miss Holden. Your father and I have plenty to discuss about the future. The future belongs to me. Clara stared him down until he finally looked away. When the door shut behind them, the silence in the room was heavy enough to crush a man. Clara could feel her mother's heartache and her father's simmering rage. "How dare you?" Judge Holden's voice was a low growl, far scarier than his yelling. "How dare you shame me in my own house in front of folks like that?" "Folks like that?" Clara shook her head. "Father, they didn't respect me one bit. They looked at me like I was a piece of property. Hayes wanted your land, Whitmore wanted a pretty thing on his arm, and Peaton wanted a challenge. Not a single one of them wanted a partner." "You are 22 years old, Clara," her mother finally said, her voice full of sorrow. "You can't run this ranch by yourself forever. What happens when we're gone? Who is going to protect you then?" "I will protect myself." But even as she said it, a familiar loneliness ached in her chest. "I do not need protecting, Mama. I need to be free." "Freedom?" Her father's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You think you are free, but you are a prisoner of your own stubborn pride. The world does not bend for you, Clara. Women who do not marry end up alone and forgotten. Then I will be alone." Her throat felt tight, but she pushed the words out. "I would rather be by myself and be me than be married and miserable, playing the part of someone I am not." Her father stared at her, and for the first time she saw something besides anger in his eyes. It was fear, a deep and genuine fear for her. "You are just like your grandmother," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "She was too wild for this world, too. She died all alone in a tiny cabin up in Wyoming with no one to care for her. Is that the life you want for yourself?" The words hit Clara like a punch. She had never known her father's mother, only heard hushed stories of the woman who raised him on the frontier. "I am not her. No, you are worse, because you have a choice, and you are throwing it away." He turned for the door, suddenly looking all of his 60 years. "Stay unmarried, run your ranch. But do not you come crying to me when you realize what you have lost." He left, and her mother followed, leaving Clara all alone in the quiet parlor. She slumped into a chair, the fight suddenly gone out of her. Through the window she saw the ranch spread out before her, the land that was her whole world. She knew every creek, every fence post, every hidden spot on this land. She knew how to make it thrive, but she did not know how to make her family understand that leaving it, and leaving herself behind, would be the end of her. A soft knock broke the silence. Thomas, the old ranch foreman, poked his head in. "Pardon me, Miss Clara, but we have got a situation over with the widow Morrison's herd." Clara was on her feet in a second, thankful for a real problem to solve. "What kind of situation?" "Some of her cattle wandered onto our north pasture. Her boy went to get 'em, but he says he saw signs of riders who did not belong there. The parlor and its ghosts were forgotten." Clara was already heading for the door. "Rustlers, get 3 good men ready. I will change and meet you at the stables in 10 minutes." Clara was already thinking ahead. The north pasture was a good 2-hour ride. If there was trouble, they needed to be ready. "Miss Clara, maybe your father ought to—" My father just told me I could run this ranch, so that is what I am fixin' to do." She paused. "Thomas, this is who I am. Are you going to start doubting me now?" A small smile touched the old cowboy's lips. "No, ma'am. Never did, never will. I will get the boys." 20 minutes later, Clara rode out with her men, her rifle resting in its scabbard. She had changed into her work trousers and worn boots, the clothes she felt right in. This was the Clara who made sense. The ride out to the North Range was beautiful. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery colors, the tension in Clara's shoulders started to fade. This was her church, out here under the big sky, not some stuffy room making small talk with men who wanted to tame her. They found the widow's 20 head of cattle easily enough. But Thomas was right. There were fresh tracks from at least 3 horses, and they had been moving fast. "Could be Morrison's own men," said a young cowboy named Billy. Clara swung down from her horse to get a better look. Could be. But these horses were shod different, and they were pushed hard, not just rambling. She stood up, her eyes scanning the horizon. The hair on the back of her neck stood up. Something was wrong. "Miss Clara." Thomas's voice was low and urgent. He pointed to a ridge about 100 yards away. 3 riders sat on their horses, clear as day against the last light. They were not hiding. They wanted to be seen. "Well," she said softly, "I reckon we are about to find out what they want." She looked at her men. "Spread out. Do not draw unless I do, but be ready for it." Clara walked forward, leading her horse, putting herself between her men and the strangers. She had to look like she was in control. The 3 men rode down the hill slow and easy. They were hard-looking men, the kind who lived rough. "Evening, ma'am." The man in the middle spoke, his voice slick with fake politeness. A scar pulled at his lip when he smiled, showing a missing tooth. "This here is private land. Are you folks lost?" "Funny," Clara shot back, her voice steady as a rock. "I was about to ask you the same question. This is the Holden Ranch. You are the ones trespassing." "Holden, you say?" The man's smile got wider. "The old judge's place. We did not realize he let his daughter ride out all alone with the hired help. Seems mighty dangerous for a lady. Seems I am managing just fine." Clara did not budge. "Now you can turn those horses around and ride on out, or I can personally escort you off my property. Your choice." The scarred man looked at his partners. One of them, a mean-looking young fella, laughed out loud. "Listen to that. The little lady thinks she's in charge. I know I'm in charge. This is my land." Clara's hand moved an inch closer to her rifle. Behind her, she heard the soft click of her men cocking their own guns. "See, that is where you are wrong, sweetheart." The man's friendly act vanished, replaced by pure menace. "We see a nice piece of land, good cattle, and a woman running the show. I call that an opportunity." Clara's blood ran cold, but her voice stayed level. "You are making a big mistake. My father is Judge Holden. You mess with me, and he will have every lawman in this territory hunting you down. Your daddy is not here right now, though, is he?" The young one sneered, his hand drifting down toward his pistol. And in that 1 second, everything went sideways. Clara knew she was about to die. 3 rustlers were drawing down on her while her own men just shouted. The world went still and quiet, just long enough for her to see how bad it was all about to end. Then, like a shot in the dark, a 4th rider burst from the trees. He moved like a blur, getting between her and the trouble in a heartbeat. His rifle cracked twice. The shots were not meant to kill, just to make a point, kicking up dirt right in front of the lead rustler's horse and sending it rearing back. The other 2 were now staring down the barrel of a man who looked like he was born holding a gun. "Leave," the stranger said. His voice was quiet but carried the weight of a judge's sentence. The scarred-up rustler thought about it for a second. You could see him weighing his chances. But whatever he saw in the stranger's eyes made him change his mind. "This is not over," he snarled, fighting his horse. "We will be back for this land." The stranger never raised his voice. "And I do not miss." That was all it took. The 3 of them tore off into the dusk. Her foreman, Thomas, ran to her side. "Miss Clara, are you all right?" She nodded, though she was shaking like a leaf. "I am fine." She turned to get a good look at the man who saved them. He was tall and lean with a hard face and eyes the color of a winter storm. They were gray eyes that held secrets she could not begin to guess. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Nobody important, ma'am," he said, just tipping his hat. "Just a drifter passing through." "I do not believe that for a second," Clara shot back. "A man with your kind of skill does not just happen by. You were watching us." A small smile touched his lips. "You are a sharp one. My father has his own ideas about a woman's value, and sharp is not on the list," she said, the words bitter in her mouth. "You did not answer my question." "No, ma'am, I did not." His hand never strayed far from his gun, and his eyes never stopped scanning the trees. "This man lived expecting a fight. You had better get your herd moved. Those men will be back, and they will bring friends." "Then we will face them then," Clara said, stepping right up to his horse. "I do not run from thieves, Mr. Elias Crow," he answered, his gaze steady and intense. "I can see that, Miss Holden. But there is a big difference between being brave and being foolish. And which one am I? The kind of woman who would rather die on her feet than live on her knees," he said flatly. "I respect that. But respect does not stop a bullet." Thomas cleared his throat. "We are mighty grateful for your help, Mr. Crow." Elias just nodded, his eyes fixed on Clara. "You need better patrols, and your men need to learn how to shoot." "No offense," he added, looking at Thomas, "but that is the plain truth." "None taken," Thomas said, looking a little stung. "We do our best." "Your best will not be good enough," Elias said as he gathered his reins to leave. "Get your cattle home, Miss Holden, and do not ride out here again without at least 5 armed men." "I do not take orders from strangers, Mr. Crow," she replied, even though she knew he was right. "But I am not a fool. We will increase our patrols." "Smart." He tipped his hat again, ready to ride off. "Wait," Clara called out before she could stop herself. "Where are you heading?" Elias paused for a moment. "Nowhere in particular." "Then nowhere can wait a day," she decided in an instant. "You saved my life and the lives of my men. The least I can do is offer you a hot meal and a bed for the night. Besides, if you think those rustlers are coming back, I could use your help." Elias hesitated. "I thank you for the offer, ma'am, but I try not to stay in one place for too long." "Why is that?" The question was blunt, but Clara had to ask. "What are you running from, Mr. Crow?" His jaw tightened. "Who says I am running? A man who rides alone and shoots like you do is either running from something or hunting something, and you do not seem like a hunter to me." They stared at each other as darkness fell, the silence between them heavy. "Ever feel like the world's got you pegged all wrong?" Clara Holden did. She ran a whole cattle operation, but to some folks, she was just a wild thing that needed taming. That night, facing down a man with eyes like a winter storm, she laid it all out. "Folks tell me I'm too much woman for one man to handle," Clara said with a dry smile. "But that does not answer my question. Will you stay?" The man, Elias, looked toward the dark horizon. "One night," he said. "Then I ride on." "Fair enough," Clara nodded. She turned to her men. "Thomas, move the herd at first light. Billy, Jake, double watches and patrols every 3 hours." She looked back at the stranger. "Mr. Crow, you can take the spare room in the main house." "The bunkhouse is fine by me," Elias cut in. "No need to cause talk." Clara nearly laughed. "Mr. People in this county started talking about me the day I was born. One more story will not hurt." She swung onto her horse. "Besides, the bunkhouse is full. Let's get on home. Something tells me tomorrow is going to be a long day." The ride back was quiet, but you could feel the tension in the air. Elias rode like a man who expected trouble from every shadow, and Clara could not help but wonder what he was running from. When they reached the ranch house, the windows were all lit up. Her father, Judge Holden, was on the porch waiting. "Clara Ann Holden, where in the Sam Hill have you been?" his voice boomed. "Trouble on the North Range, Daddy," she said, swinging down from her horse. "Rustlers." The anger left his face in a hurry. "Are you hurt?" He stopped cold when he saw Elias getting off his horse. "Who is this?" "Elias Crow, Daddy. He stepped in when things got ugly. Probably saved my life." "Mr. Crow," the judge said, his eyes narrowing. "I am grateful, but I have to ask, what brings a man with your skills to this part of Texas?" "Just passing through, sir," Elias said, his voice quiet. "Heard there might be work." "What kind of work?" the judge pressed. "Whatever needs doing. I am good with horses and cattle, and I can shoot." "I noticed," the judge said. "That is lawman training if I have ever seen it." The muscle in Elias's jaw jumped. "Was, sir, a long time ago." "Not that long, I would wager," the judge replied. He motioned to the house. "Well, any man who protects my daughter has earned a hot meal and a roof over his head. Come on in." As they walked up, Clara told her father, "They said they would be back. We need to get ready." "We will talk about it in the morning," he said, but his hand on her shoulder was tight. "You took 10 years off my life, girl. What were you thinking, facing down armed men? I was thinking this is my ranch, and my responsibility, Clara said, meeting his gaze. We will argue tomorrow. Tonight, I am just glad you are home safe. Inside, the house was warm and bright. Her mother, Catherine, and their housekeeper, Maria, fussed over them. Elias just stood in the hall, looking as out of place as a coyote in a church. He held his hat, and Clara saw his knuckles were all scarred up. "Mr. Crow, you must be starving," Catherine said, pointing to the dining room. "That is kind, ma'am, but I do not want to be a bother." "Nonsense," her mother said. "You saved our daughter. The least we can do is feed you. Now please sit down." Supper was a quiet affair. Elias answered questions without saying much of anything, like trying to rope the wind. Afterwards, Catherine showed him to his room, and Clara stayed behind with her father. She knew this talk was coming. "He is hiding something big," the judge said right off. "That man is running from something dangerous." "He saved my life, Daddy." "That does not make him a saint. It just makes me wonder why he was there at all. Men like that, skilled and silent, they are either running from the law or hunting someone down." Clara did not argue. She knew he had a point. "He did not have to help us," she said softly. "He could have just ridden on by." "Could he?" her father asked. "Or did he have his own reasons for getting involved?" She finally admitted, "I do not know. But I know those men were fixing to hurt us, and he stopped them. That has got to count for something." "It counts that he is good at violence," her father shot back. "Be careful, Clara. Careful. You wear your heart on your sleeve." "My heart?" She let out a short, bitter laugh. "Daddy, you spent all evening parading fellas through here who looked at me like a piece of property. Now you are warning me off the one man who treated me like an equal?" "That is different," he said, frustrated. "How? Those men are from good families. We know who they are. This Crow fellow is dangerous, Clara. You can feel it." "Of course I can feel it," she said, standing to face him. "But dangerous and evil are not the same thing. You are the one who taught me to judge a man by his actions, not his past." A flicker of pride crossed his face. "I am not being naive. I am being hopeful," she finished. She headed for the door. "Good night, Daddy. Thanks for not fighting me on him staying." "Arguing with you is like yelling at a stump," he sighed. "Just be careful." "Always am." As Clara went up the stairs, she paused outside the guest room door. She heard him moving around inside and almost knocked to thank him again, to ask him to stay. But she just rested her hand on the door for a second before going to her own room. Sleep was not coming easy. All she could think about was the stranger down the hall. Her father was right. Elias Crow was hiding something. But he had looked at her not like a prize to be won, but like a partner, and she had to find out if that was a truth worth the risk. She knew then that having this dangerous, secretive man under her roof meant nothing would ever be quite the same. The next morning, Clara came downstairs, ready for a hard day's work, and stopped in her tracks. Elias was already in the kitchen talking to her cook, Maria, about the best way to defend the north pasture. He looked up when she entered, and for a split second, she saw something like relief in his eyes. "Morning, Miss Holden," he said. "Morning, Mr. Crow." Clara poured herself coffee, feeling a smile she could not quite hide. "I hope you slept well." "Well enough," he said, his eyes holding hers for a moment. "I was thinking about your rustler problem. I have some ideas if you care to hear them." She smiled over the rim of her cup. "Mr. Crow, I am always interested in good ideas." As sunlight filled the kitchen, Clara felt that the future was opening up. She had spent her life being told she was too wild for any man, but now, possibility felt like coming home. Outside on the porch, the air smelled of pine. Clara stood with Elias, watching as Thomas organized the ranch hands into their patrol groups. "Your northern fence line is too exposed," Elias said, pointing toward the hills. "That is how they got in. The land gives them cover all the way to your pasture." Clara looked and saw her own ranch in a new way. "We have always patrolled that area, but you are right. A determined group could slip through. It is more than that, Elias said, turning to face her. Your hands are good men, but they are cowboys, not soldiers. They ride predictable routes at predictable times. Anyone watching would know exactly when to strike. So what do you suggest? You need irregular patrols at different times with different routes. And you need lookout points on high ground, where a man with a rifle can see trouble coming from a mile away. Clara's mind was already rearranging the ranch's defenses. That would take more men. We are already stretched thin, then hire more men. Or... Elias hesitated, and she saw him wrestle with the decision. Or I could stay on for a few weeks. I could train your men and set up a proper defense. I thought you did not stay in one place. I do not, he said, looking out at the horizon. But those rustlers will not give up. They saw an easy prize and they will be back with more men. If I leave now, you will be fighting a losing battle. Clara studied his hard profile. Why do you care? You do not know us. This is not your fight. Elias was quiet for a long moment, letting the question hang in the clean morning air. His voice was low and carried a heavy weight. I've seen what happens when good folks are left to fend for themselves against predators. I've watched families get destroyed and lives ruined because someone who could have helped just looked the other way. He turned, his eyes locking with hers. I won't be that person again. Clara felt the history in his words. What happened to you, Mr. Crow? He straightened up, his guard returning. Nothing to talk about on a fine morning like this. The question is, do you want my help or not? Yes, she said without a second thought. We need your help. Your father won't like it, Elias warned. He already doesn't trust me. Clara managed a small smile. My father doesn't trust anyone he can't question on a witness stand. This is my call. You're hired, Mr. Crow. Standard wages, plus room and board. I don't need... he started. You work, you get paid. That's how it is. She held out her hand. He hesitated for a moment before taking it. His grip was firm and calloused, a working man's handshake, but it held a careful strength. All right then, Elias said. Let's get to it. First, we need to talk to your men. That morning, Elias transformed from a quiet drifter into a true leader. He explained tactics to the hands with a natural patience, and the men who were wary at first quickly saw he knew exactly what he was doing. They respected it. Mr. Crow was in the war, Billy whispered to Clara. He knows his stuff. Does it matter which side he was on? Clara asked quietly. Billy just shrugged. Not to me. But some folks are particular. Out on the northern range, Elias studied the ground. They'll have a camp nearby, he said, pointing. Probably up in those hills. Close enough to watch y'all, far enough to stay hidden. Should we go after them? Jake asked, ready for a fight. No, Elias said firmly. That's what they're counting on. It's better to let them think we're unprepared. Make 'em come to us on ground we choose. Clara hated waiting, but she knew he was right. How long do we give them? Not long. A week, maybe less. Elias dismounted, examining some tracks in the dirt. These are at least 2 days old. They've been watching you for a while. A chill ran down Clara's spine. How many times had she ridden out here alone, never knowing she was being watched? Just then, Thomas rode up. Miss Clara, the widow Morrison sent word. She wants to talk about the rustlers. It seems they've been paying her a visit, too. Of course they have, Clara said, her jaw tight. She's a widow with just a couple of hands, an easy target, of hired hands and her young son. She's the kind of target they'd hit first. We ought to help her, Elias said. We can coordinate and share information. The rustlers are counting on picking you off one by one. The ride to the Morrison Ranch took another hour. It was a smaller place tucked in a valley with good water, but not much in the way of cover. Margaret Morrison, a woman in her 40s who looked like she'd fought for every scrap she owned, came out to meet them. She grabbed Clara's hands. Thank heavens you're safe. When Tommy told me what happened, I nearly came riding myself. I'm all right, Margaret, but we need to figure out how to protect our homes. Clara motioned to Elias. This is Elias Crow. He's helping us. Margaret gave Elias a hard look, the kind a woman gives when she has to size a man up fast. You know how to handle rustlers, Mr. Crow? I know how to handle a fight, ma'am. Same principles. He saved my life, Clara added. He's got military training. We're lucky he's here. Inside her small home, they looked over a hand-drawn map. Elias got straight to the point. You're too exposed here, Mrs. Morrison. If they come in force, you can't hold out long enough for us to get here. I know, Margaret said, her voice tight. But my husband built this place. I'm not leaving it. I'm not asking you to leave it. But you have to be practical. How many men you got? 2 hands and my son Tommy when he's not in school. He's only 15, but he can shoot. That makes 3.5 guns against maybe a dozen men. Elias shook his head. You can't win those odds. So what am I supposed to do? Margaret's voice was filled with frustration. I can't afford to hire a private army. Clara spoke up. You don't have to. We'll combine our men. We'll station some of our hands here and run joint patrols. If they hit either one of us, we all ride. Margaret hesitated. Clara, your father would never agree to that. My father put me in charge. This is my decision, Clara said, her tone firm but gentle. We are stronger together. It's just common sense. Elias nodded in agreement. She's right. And we can use your property as a lookout. A watch post here would give us an early warning if anyone comes from the north. They spent the next couple of hours ironing out the plan. By the time they headed back, the sun was sinking low, painting the sky gold. You handled her well, Clara said as they rode. Margaret can be proud about accepting help, but you made her feel like a partner. She is a partner, Elias said. It's her home she's defending, just like you. Not everyone sees it that way. Then not everyone is worth a damn, he said simply. Clara smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. You're not like most men I've met, Mr. Crow. Is that good or bad? Just different. You don't try to make people smaller. You see what they can do and help them do it better. Most men I know are threatened by a capable woman. You seem to respect it. Elias was quiet for a second. I knew someone a long time ago, he said. A woman who could outride, outshoot, and outthink nearly any man. She never let anyone shrink her down. She taught me strength comes in all shapes. What happened to her? His face closed off again. She died. A long time ago. Clara wanted to ask more, but his tone was a closed door. She sounds like she was one of a kind. She was, Elias said, nudging his horse forward. We should get back before dark. The next few days settled into a new routine. Elias drilled the ranch hands from sunup to sundown, teaching them tactics that turned them into a real defensive force. Clara was always there, learning right alongside them. He was a patient teacher, but he pushed them hard, and the men respected him for it. Clara's respect for him grew every day, but it was the quiet moments that stayed with her. The times they were alone, checking on cattle in the far pastures. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words had weight. Ever think about leaving? He asked one evening as they watched the sunset. Going somewhere easier? Every single day, Clara admitted, but this land, as hard as it is mine. I've built something that matters, even if it means I'll be alone. I've made my peace with that. Better to be alone and my own woman than tied to a man who wants to put me in a cage. Elias nodded. I used to think that way myself, thought it was safer not to get close to anyone. If you don't let them in, you can't lose them. And now I think maybe I was just scared. He turned and looked at her, his eyes soft in the dim light. Fear makes us cowards, Miss Holden. Is that why you keep moving? Because you're scared? Maybe, he said, looking away. Or maybe I'm just tired of burying folks I care about. Clara felt the deep sorrow in his words. Who did you lose? She thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said so quietly she almost missed it. Everyone. The simple word broke her heart. I'm so sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. He stood up. We ought to head back. Your father will be worrying. But as they rode home, she couldn't stop thinking about him, carrying all that loss alone. His wasn't the loneliness of choice, but the loneliness of a man who was the only one left standing. A week later, Judge Holden called Clara into his study for a talk she knew was coming. "This has to stop," he said, getting straight to it. "This business with Mr. Crow." "What business?" "He's doing the job he was hired for." "His job?" The judge sounded doubtful. "Clara, you spend every waking moment with the man. You ride out alone with him and you take his word over Thomas's. You look at him." He trailed off. "Like what, Father? Like he matters?" The judge stood behind his big desk like he was on the bench. "You don't know a thing about him. You're trusting a complete stranger with this entire ranch. I trust him because he's earned it. He's done more to protect this place in 1 week than anyone else has done in months. This isn't about protection, Clara." The judge's voice softened just a bit. "I see how you look at him, and I see how he looks at you. This won't end well for you." Clara's cheeks grew warm. "You're seeing things. Am I? I'm your father. I know you. You've never looked at any of your other suitors the way you look at Elias Crow." "That's because none of them were worth a second glance," she shot back. "They all wanted to own me, to change me into some proper little wife. Elias doesn't do that." "Elias, is it? Not Mr. Crow anymore?" Her father shook his head. "He's a dangerous man, Clara. Not just with a gun. He's dangerous because he makes you want things you can't have." "What can't I have?" she challenged him. "A partner who respects me? Someone who sees me as his equal? Why is that so impossible?" "Because men like Crow are drifters. They run from things, and when the past finally catches up, they'll be gone without a word." "Is that what you want? To build your life on shifting sand?" Clara wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Her father was right about one thing. Elias had never once talked about staying. "I know he'll leave," she said, her voice low. "I've always known." "Then why are you putting yourself through this?" "Because for the first time I've met a man who makes me feel like my strength isn't a flaw." Clara looked her father straight in the eye. "You wanted me to find a suitable husband. Well, maybe I'm finally learning what suitable really means. It's not about what society wants. It is about finding someone who wants me, just as I am." Judge Holden let out a long, heavy sigh, suddenly looking much older. "And when he's gone, when his past comes calling? When his past—" "What then?" her father had asked. "Then I'll survive just like I always have," Clara had told him, heading for the door. "But I'd rather have something real for a little while than something fake forever." His words still echoed in her mind, full of fear not for Elias, but for her. Later that night, unable to sleep, Clara slipped out of the house. She saw a figure on the bunkhouse porch. It was Elias, sitting with his back against the wall, keeping watch. "Can't sleep either?" she called softly. He turned, and she could just make out his smile in the dark. "Old habits. I sleep light." Clara sat beside him, leaving a respectful space between them. "Soldier habits. Among other things," he said quietly. "Your father is right to worry about me. You heard us. Sound carries at night. He's right, Clara. I am dangerous, and not just because I know how to use a gun." The sound of her first name sent a little shiver through her. "What else makes you dangerous?" "I make people hope for things I can't give them." He looked at her, and the raw honesty in his eyes took her breath away. "I should have left after that first night." "Then why did you stay?" she asked. "Because you asked me to, and because—" He stopped himself, then stood up, putting distance between them. "Because I'm selfish. I wanted a few more days of feeling like a man instead of a ghost. But that doesn't change the reality of it." Clara stood too. "And what is the reality, Elias?" "The reality is I have enemies, real ones, and they won't stop hunting me. The reality is that anyone who gets close to me ends up a target." "Who are these enemies? What did you do?" For a long moment he was silent. Then the story spilled out of him. I was a marshal back in Kansas. Good at my job, maybe too good. There was a powerful man, see, with money and connections, running guns and whiskey, anything for a profit. You tried to arrest him. I tried, but he owned the judges and politicians. Every time I got close, evidence would just vanish. Elias's hands balled into fists. So I got stupid. I went after him outside the law, gathered my own proof. That sounds brave, not stupid. It was stupid because I underestimated him. Elias's voice cracked. He found out what I was doing, and he killed everyone I cared about, my partner, his family. A woman He burned them out and made sure the law pinned it all on me. Influenced to make his story the gospel truth. Elias looked her square in the eye. I ran, Clara. If I'd stayed, they'd have stretched my neck for something I didn't do. Or I'd have killed him myself and swung for that instead. So I've just been moving, always one step ahead of the law and the men he pays. That's why you're always watching your back. That's why I can't put down roots. If that man finds me here, his hired guns won't care who gets in the way. Your folks, you'd all be targets just for knowing my name. It all finally clicked for Clara. This man has a name, doesn't he? Thomas Gaines. He's a railroad man with deep pockets, buys up land and any kind of justice he wants. The name tasted like poison. Last I knew, he was moving his business into Montana, which is why I've been keeping my head down. So he's here somewhere. A cold fear washed over her. He could be close. Could be. But his reach is long. Elias stepped closer. Now do you see why I have to go? Why there's no future for us? I see you're running scared, Clara said, holding his gaze. And I see why. But you can't run forever, Elias. Sooner or later, you gotta make a stand. A man can't fight that much money and power. I learned that the hard way. Not alone, you can't. But you're not alone here. She took his hand. You don't have to do this by yourself. He looked at their hands, a war fighting inside him, wanting to believe her, but knowing it was a fool's hope. You don't know what you're asking, he finally said. I'm asking you to trust me, to believe some things are worth the risk. Elias opened his mouth, but a shout from the north cut him off. Both of them snapped to attention as Thomas ran up, winded. Miss Clara, Mr. Crow, it's the Morrison place. There's a fire on the horizon. They didn't waste a second. In minutes, they were on horseback, riding hard toward the Morrison ranch with 6 armed men right behind them. The orange glow against the night sky grew bigger and meaner. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. Please, Lord, let Margaret be all right. When they got to the last hill, Clara saw her worst fear come to life. The main house was a roaring inferno with riders circling it like buzzards. She could hear the shouts and the crack of rifles. The rustlers, Elias said, his voice grim. They hit her tonight because they knew we were getting organized. Well, they're about to find out we don't spook easy. Clara pulled her rifle, checking the load like she'd done 1,000 times. Thomas, you and 3 men swing round from the east. Push 'em toward the creek where they got no cover. We'll hit 'em from here. Miss Clara, you ought to stay back, Thomas pleaded. I'm not staying anywhere. This is my fight now, too. Clara looked at Elias. Ready? He just nodded, the soldier in him taken over. He was focused, deadly, and calm. Stay close, he ordered, and don't take any chances. These fellas are killers. So are you, she shot back. Let's finish this. They charged down that hill like thunder. The rustlers, caught completely by surprise, scattered. They clearly thought they had more time. Instead, they were trapped between 2 groups of angry, well-armed defenders. The fight was short and ugly. Clara fired with a steady hand, pinning the rustlers down while Elias and the ranch hands closed in. She spotted the scarred leader from before. He saw her too and turned his horse, murder in his eyes. But Elias was quicker. He spurred his horse right between them and his rifle barked just once. The scarred man dropped from his saddle. That broke them. The rest of the rustlers scattered into the dark. We need to help Mrs. Morrison, Elias said, stopping Clara from giving chase. The house was a lost cause, just flames eating away at everything Margaret had ever built. But then Clara saw them by the barn. It was Margaret, her boy Tommy, and their 2 ranch hands. They were shaken, but they were safe. Clara! Margaret cried, stumbling toward her. They came so fast, we barely got out. You're safe now. That's all that matters." Clara hugged the older woman tight. "But everything, all of Henry's work, it's all gone." Margaret's voice broke. Tommy stood there, his young face hard, holding a rifle. "We fought back, Mama. We didn't just let 'em." "You did good, son," Elias said, his voice gentle. "You protected your mother. Buildings are just wood. They spent the night making sure the fires didn't spread." As the sun came up, Clara looked at the ruin. The house was just a black skeleton. "Margaret has to come with us," she told Elias. "They'll be back, and they'll come back meaner." Elias agreed, his face grim. "We hurt them tonight. That makes us a bigger problem, so they'll come back with more men. Then we find them first," Clara said, her jaw set hard. "That's just what they'll be expecting." "So what's your plan?" "We need to know where they're holed up and who's helping them. Someone in town is feeding them supplies and information. We find that link, and the whole thing unravels." Clara wanted to ride out right then and make someone pay, but she knew he was right. Elias must have seen the fire in her eyes. "I know you want to hit back," he said softly. "But fighting smart is a whole lot better than fighting mad. Trust me." And she did. She trusted him completely. This drifter with the haunted eyes had become the one person she could count on. "All right," she said, "we do it your way. But Elias, they burned a good woman's home. They could have killed her. I won't stop until they've paid." "Neither will I," he said, his voice like steel. "I promise you, Clara, we will end this." They brought Margaret and Tommy back to the Holden Ranch. Even Judge Holden, who didn't much care for Elias, welcomed them with open arms. That evening, Clara stood on the porch watching the sun paint the sky. So much had changed. The rustlers were no longer a distant threat, and Elias, who should have been long gone, was now at the center of it all. He came and stood beside her as the light faded. "Your father thinks I'm trouble," he said with a half-smile. "My father thinks everyone's trouble but him," she smiled back. "But he's thankful for what you did. We all are. Just did what had to be done." "No." Clara turned to face him. "You could have held back. But you put yourself between me and that man's gun. You saved my life. I told you. Anyone who gets close to me becomes a target. I won't let that be you, even though you're still planning to leave." The question just hung there between them. "I don't know anymore," he admitted, his voice low. "I don't know what I'm doing. All I know is right now, I can't imagine riding away from this ranch. From you." Her heart skipped a beat. "Then don't. It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." She stepped closer, closing the space between them. "You told me about your past, about the danger, and I'm telling you, I don't care. I'd rather take that risk with you than be safe by myself." "Clara, you don't know what you're saying." "Don't I? All my life, men have tried to make me smaller, safer, to fit into some little box. All of them except you." She reached up and touched his face. "You see me for who I am." Elias held her hand against his cheek. "You deserve better than a wanted man." "I deserve to choose for myself," she said firmly. "And I choose this. I choose you." For a long moment, they just stood there under the brand-new stars. Then Elias finally leaned in. He pulled her close, and Clara felt his last defenses crumble. "I don't know how to stay," he whispered into her hair. "I've been running so long I don't remember how to stand still." "Then we'll learn how together," she said, pulling back to look him in the eye. "Whatever is coming, we face it together. That's what a partnership is." "Partnership," he said the word like it was from a foreign language. "I haven't had a partner in a long, long time." "Well, you've got one now," she said with a small smile. "And I'm stubborn, opinionated, and I don't take orders well." Elias actually laughed, a real warm sound. "I noticed. It's one of the things I like most about you." They stood there under the stars, holding on to each other, and Clara felt a shift deep inside her. This was it. Not someone to fix her, but someone to stand beside her as an equal. The fight with the rustlers was far from over, and Thomas Gaines was still out there, a shadow on the horizon. The future was a dangerous, unknown road. But as Elias held her under that big Montana sky, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. The next morning, a cold rain fell, turning the ranch to mud. Clara stood with Margaret in the kitchen, watching the widow sort through what little she'd saved from the fire. A charred picture frame, an old quilt, her late husband's pocket watch. It wasn't much to show for 20 years of hard work. "This wasn't just a building," Margaret whispered, her hand shaking as she touched the burned photograph. "They took my home, Clara. They nearly took my son. I want them to pay." Clara's voice was like steel. "And they will. Elias and I are riding to town. We are going to find out who is backing them, and we are going to put a stop to it." "Be careful," Margaret warned. "Men who would burn down a house will do anything." That thought stayed with Clara as she found Elias in the stable. He was checking his guns, a familiar and steady motion. He looked up, and a silent understanding passed between them. "Ready?" he asked. "I am." As she grabbed her rifle, she paused. "Elias, if this turns into a fight," he cut her off gently. "It will not. Today is for information. The fighting comes later." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I have learned that a hot head loses more fights than a cool one." The 2-hour ride to town was through a miserable, soaking rain. Copper Creek was just a muddy main street with a saloon, a general store, and not much else. But it was the only place for miles where news traveled faster than a horse could run. As they tied up their animals, Elias scanned the street. "See something?" Clara asked quietly. "3 men in the saloon," he said, his jaw tight. "They do not look like locals." "You think it is them?" "Could be, but we stick to the plan. We do not draw attention." Inside the general store, the owner, Harold Brennan, greeted them. He was a man who knew every secret in the valley. "Clara, and you must be that Mr. Crow I have heard about." His smile faded as he looked at her. "I heard about Margaret's place, a terrible business." "They are safe with us," Clara said, getting straight to the point. "Harold, those rustlers are getting supplies from somewhere. Ammunition, food, information." Harold got a guarded look. "Now, Clara, I cannot be accusing folks." "I am not asking you to accuse," she said, her voice firm. "I am asking for help. They burned a woman and child out of their home. Next time it could be yours." Harold was quiet for a good long while, like a man arguing with himself. Finally, he let out a heavy sigh. "There's a fella been coming in these past couple of weeks," he said. "Buys more than one man needs, pays with cash and never offers a name. He's always asking who's been around and what they're buying. Tries to be casual, but he's a little too interested." "What's he look like?" Elias asked. "Tall and lean. Got a scar right here," Harold said, tracing a line on his own jaw. "When he smiles, you see a missing tooth on the left." Clara and Elias shared a look. It was the leader of the rustlers, the man Elias had shot at during the fire. "So he's still kicking," Elias said softly. "I thought my shot found him." "It did," Clara said. "I saw him fall when his horse threw him. You must have only winged him." Elias turned back to the storekeeper. "Did this man say where he's holed up?" "Keeps to himself," Harold said, shaking his head. "But I did see him talking to someone outside the saloon once. Seemed friendly enough." "Who was it?" "That's the strange part. It was Jonathan Peaton." The name hit Clara like a punch to the gut. Peaton was one of the men who had tried to court her. "Are you sure?" she demanded. "Saw him clear as day about a week ago. Peaton was in town talking about railroad deals. He spent a good 10 minutes with that scarred fella." "What's Peaton's business here in Montana?" Elias asked. "Mostly land," Harold answered. "He works for some big railroad company back east. He's been buying up property, giving good money to ranchers looking to sell." And for those who don't want to sell? Clara asked, already dreading the answer. Well, I reckon it'd be mighty convenient if their ranches started having problems, Harold said, his face grim. Rustlers, fires, the kind of trouble that makes a man want to move on. Outside, the rain was coming down in sheets. Clara and Elias stood under the awning, the anger rising in her. It all makes sense now, she said through clenched teeth. Piton wants our land. Daddy won't sell, so he's making trouble, hoping we'll get scared and take his offer. It's an old trick, Elias agreed. Force folks out, buy their land for cheap, then sell it to the railroad for a huge profit. The rich men keep their hands clean while hired guns do the dirty work. That's why he kept coming around, Clara realized with a wave of disgust. He wasn't courting me. He was spying on us, using it as a cover to get his hands on our ranch. The real question is, can we prove it? Elias said, his gaze fixed on the saloon down the street. And more important, can we stop him before somebody gets killed? What do you propose we do? Clara asked. Elias thought for a moment. We need to find their camp. We need proof that connects those rustlers to Piton. Then we take it all to the territorial marshal. The law? Clara shook her head. You said yourself that men like Piton own the law. Not all lawmen are for sale, he said, a hint of old pain in his voice. I wasn't. And this is our best shot to end this without more killing. If we go after him ourselves, we'll be the ones behind bars. She knew he was right. So how do we find their camp? We follow the supplies. Harold said the scarred man comes in for provisions. The next time he does, we follow him back. And if he doesn't come back? Then we give him a reason to, Elias said, a cold smile touching his lips. We hit their operation so hard they have to come back for more supplies. We force them to show their hand. You're talking about using ourselves as bait. I'm talking about turning the tables. They've been hunting us. Now it's our turn to hunt them, he said, looking at her seriously. But this is dangerous, Clara. If you want to step back, now's the time. Not a chance, she said, her voice like steel. This is my ranch, and we're partners. Where you go, I go. A brief, warm look crossed his face. Stubborn woman. You knew what you were getting into. As the sun started to dip low, they prepared to ride back to the ranch. Just as they were mounting up, a smooth voice called out, Miss Holden, what a lovely surprise! Jonathan Peaton walked out of the hotel, looking perfect despite the muddy streets. His smile was as polished as his expensive boots. Clara's stomach tightened. Mr. Peaton, she said, keeping her voice even, I didn't know you were still in town. Business with the railroad is keeping me here, he said. His eyes slid over to Elias, a coldness creeping in. And who is this? I don't believe we've met. Elias Crow, Elias said, his voice flat. He did not offer his hand. I work for Miss Holden. Ah, the hero of the hour, Peaton said, his smile never faltering. I've heard all about you, though I must say it's curious for a simple ranch hand to have your particular set of skills. A man learns what he needs to survive, Elias replied smoothly. The frontier ain't kind. No, I suppose not, Peaton said, turning back to Clara. I was so sorry to hear about the Morrisons. If the widow is interested in selling what's left, I would be happy to make her a generous offer, help her start over somewhere safer. Clara wanted to curse him right there in the street. But she remembered Elias's warning. That's kind of you, she said. I'll tell her. Please do, Peaton said, stepping closer. And I hope you'll reconsider my own offer. A husband with influence could offer a great deal of protection in these troubled times. I appreciate the thought, Mr. Peaton, but like I said before, I am not interested, Clara said, swinging up into her saddle. If you'll excuse us, we need to get home. She could feel his eyes on their backs as they rode out of town. The silence on the trail was heavy. That man makes my skin crawl, she finally said. He's dangerous, Elias said quietly. And he knows something's up. You saw the way he looked at me. He's trying to figure out if I'm a threat. Are you? Absolutely, Elias said. From now on, we have to assume he's watching our every move. They rode on, both of them on high alert. The rain had stopped, but the gray clouds swallowed the light. About halfway home, Elias raised a hand, signaling for her to stop. Clara pulled her horse up and listened hard. Over the sound of the wind, she heard it. Voices, off in the distance. Elias swung down from his horse, motioning for her to do the same. They crept forward, using the rolling hills for cover. As they got closer, the words became clear. "I don't care what Peaton says. We should have finished the job at the Morrison place. Killed 'em all." Then another voice, the one that belonged to the scarred man, answered. "And have every lawman in the territory on our tails? Use your head. Peaton wants it to look like bad luck. We start leaving bodies, and it brings the kind of attention we don't need." They were close, maybe 30 yards out, hidden in a shallow ditch. Elias motioned for silence as they crept near. "Bad luck," one man grumbled. 2 months, and all we have is a burned-out shack and cattle we cannot sell, all while Peaton sits in a hotel drinking whiskey. "He will pay us when the job is done," a scarred man replied. "Once he owns the valley for that new railroad, we will get our share. We just need a few more ranches to give up. The Holden place is the big one. We take them, the others will crumble. That place has that new fella, Crow. He is trouble. One man is not anything. We hit them hard and fast tomorrow night. Burn the buildings, scatter the herd. Make it too costly for the old judge to stay." Clara felt a cold dread. Tomorrow night. They had less than 24 hours. Elias touched her arm, signaling a silent retreat. Once they were clear, he spoke, his voice urgent. "We have to get back, now. We have to warn everyone." Elias turned the ranch into a fortress. He moved with quiet authority, directing men to set up defensive spots in the hayloft, behind water troughs, and in the upstairs windows of the house. Judge Holden watched from his study, his eyes sharp. "So it has come to a fight." "Tomorrow night, Father," Clara said. "At least a dozen of them. They plan to burn us out, just like they did to Margaret." "Then we will be ready," her father said, his voice hard as iron. "I built this land from dust, and I will defend it with my last breath." Catherine, her mother, appeared. "The women and children should go to town." "No," Margaret said from behind her, her voice clear and strong. "I will not run again. My home is gone, because I was not ready to fight. I will not make that mistake a second time. My husband taught me how to shoot. Let me help." All evening they prepared. Elias coached the men, showing them how to aim, how to move, and how to provide covering fire. He was no longer a quiet drifter, but a true commander. As night fell, he spread a map on the dining table. "They will try to hit us from all sides," he explained. "They expect chaos. They expect fear. We will not give them either one." "What if there are more of them than we know?" Billy's voice was tight with worry. "What if the odds are just too long?" Elias's reply was steady as a rock. "Then every shot has to find a home. I have seen worse odds. We hold our ground, we do not waste lead, and we trust the man next to us. That is how we win." Judge Holden pointed at the map. "This handles the rustlers, but what about Peaton?" "One fight at a time," Elias said. "We get through the night, then we settle things with him." "How?" Clara pressed. "He has money, influence. He will walk free." Elias's eyes hardened. "Not if we drag him into the light where everyone can see him for what he is. I have the start of a plan, but it all hinges on tomorrow." The night dragged on. Nobody could find sleep. They just lay there, thinking, checking their weapons for the 10th time. Around midnight, Clara was in the kitchen, needing something for her hands to do. Elias appeared beside her, quiet as a ghost. "Are you scared?" she asked. "To the bone," he admitted. "But fear keeps you sharp. It is when you let it freeze you up that it gets you killed. I have never been in a real gunfight." "I know," he finished for her. "The waiting is always the hardest part." Clara turned to him. "Promise me. If it goes south, you get my mother and Margaret out of here. No heroes, just save them, Elias. Promise me. He was quiet for a long beat, then gave a slow nod. I promise, but it will not come to that. We are going to win. How can you be so sure? Because we are fighting for our home, for our own. They are just fighting for a paycheck. He took her hand, his grip firm. That makes all the difference. In the quiet kitchen, they just stood there, a silent comfort passing between them. The big Montana sky outside did not care about their troubles. Clara thought about all the turns that had brought her to this night, to this man. She would not change a single one. I am glad you stayed, she said softly. He brought her hand to his lips. Me too. For the first time in 3 long years, I feel like I am right where I belong. Dawn arrived, cold and clear, a beautiful day for an ugly business. Folks tried to act normal, but the air was thick with tension. Every little sound made someone jump. Through it all, Elias was their anchor, moving among them with a quiet word, checking their setups. He was more than a hired gun now. He was the man they were all counting on. As the sun started to dip low, painting the sky in long shadows, Elias gathered them. They will come at dusk, he said, his voice low and sure. They will try to use the fading light for cover, thinking it will spook us. But we will use it on them. We know every rock and ditch on this land. They do not. They are riding straight into our trap. What if they do not come? Someone asked. Oh, they will come, Elias said. Peyton needs us gone. They have to come. As the group broke up to take their posts, Clara grabbed his arm. Where will you be? Wherever the fight is thickest. Her face gently. Clara, if the shooting starts, you hold your ground. Don't you go running around. Trust the plan. I trust you. He gave her a warm smile, but his eyes were pure steel. Time to show these fellas what happens when they mess with our home. Our home. The words settled in Clara's heart. Not his, not hers, but theirs. She took her position at the upper window, rifle resting on the sill. From there, she could see the whole ranch yard. Margaret was across the hall, covering the other side. Below, Thomas and 3 others were holed up in the barn. Elias was a ghost near the main gate. The sun bled across the horizon, painting the sky in fire and blood. Clara's heart hammered. Her palms were slick with sweat. Then she saw them. At least 15 riders materializing out of the tree line like phantoms. They moved with an arrogance that said they owned the world. They were dead wrong. Clara's finger found the trigger. She heard the soft click of Margaret's rifle beside her. These weren't common thugs. They were hired guns brought in by Piton. The leader was the scarred man. Even in the dim light, she could see the cruelty carved into his face. He was directing his men, completely unaware that he was walking straight into a trap. They were nearly in position when Elias's voice rang out, sharp and clear. That's far enough, boys. The rustlers froze. The scarred leader's head snapped around, trying to find the voice. Elias stepped out from the shadows, rifle in hand. You're trespassing, he said calmly. Turn your horses around and ride on out, and nobody has to get hurt tonight. The scarred man sneered. Mighty big words for one man facing 15. Where's your boss, Crow? And where's the girl? Right here, Clara called down from the window. All around the yard, her father's defenders made their presence known. Suddenly, the rustlers were surrounded, caught in a crossfire they never saw coming. Fear flickered across their faces. This was not the plan. You're outnumbered, the scarred man bluffed, but his voice wavered. Smart money says you give up now. Smart money says you didn't scout this place properly, Elias shot back. You're in a kill box, gentlemen. Every one of you has 2 rifles aimed at him. You so much as twitch, and this ground gets soaked with your blood. For a long second, nobody moved. The scarred leader was doing the math in his head. Then his eyes shifted, and a triumphant grin spread across his face. I don't think so, Crow. See, we brought a little insurance. 2 more riders came out of the dark. Between them, they held a prisoner, A terrified boy, maybe 12 years old. Clara's blood turned to ice. She knew him. He was the blacksmith's son. "Drop your weapons," the scarred man ordered, "or the boy dies right now." Clara's finger tightened on the trigger as she stared at the boy's terrified eyes. The child was shaking, a gag stuffed in his mouth. One of the men held a pistol to his head with a casual cruelty that made her stomach turn. "You cowards!" Margaret's voice cracked with fury from across the hall. "Using a child for a shield?" The leader just laughed. "We're the kind that gets paid to win. Now drop your guns or the kid's brains are going to paint the ground. Your call." Clara saw Elias's jaw clench. There was no good shot, no way to take out the rustler without hitting the boy. They were trapped, and the scarred man knew it. "All right," Elias said, his voice steady. "Let the boy go. We'll talk." "Talk?" The scarred man chuckled. "Nothing to talk about. You lay down your guns, walk away from this ranch, and maybe we let y'all live. If you don't, we start killing folks, starting with him." The rustler pushed the gun harder against the boy's temple. The child whimpered. Clara felt sick. They had prepared for a fight between armed men, but this was different. This was pure evil. She saw her father, Judge Marcus Holden, step onto the porch, his face pale but firm. "If you harm that boy," the judge said, his voice low and dangerous, "there is no place in this territory you can hide. I will hunt you down and see you hang." "Big words," the scarred man mocked. "Here's what's going to happen. The famous Judge Holden is going to sign the deed to this ranch over to Mr. Peaton. All nice and legal. Then you're all going to ride out with just the clothes on your backs. Do that and the boy lives. Peaton." Elias spoke the name like a curse. "So he finally shows his true colors." The scarred leader's grin was vicious. "Mr. Peaton gets what he wants. The question is, Judge, is your pride worth more than this boy's life?" Clara watched her father, saw the terrible conflict in his eyes. His whole life was built on justice, on never backing down to thugs. But how could he hold to that with a child's life on the line? "Father, no," Clara's voice cut through the tension. "You can't. If we surrender, they'll kill us all anyway. They're murderers." "The girl's got a point," one of the rustlers muttered. The leader shot him a look that could kill. "Shut up." He turned back to the judge. "The clock is ticking. Make your choice." Clara's mind raced. There had to be another way. Elias had taught her that a fight was about more than guns. It was about finding your enemy's weakness. The scarred man wanted the ranch, yes, but more than that, he wanted to get paid. And for that, he needed the judge alive. Yet, it gave her a slim advantage, but it was something. Before she could make a plan, Elias started talking, and his voice had a whole different feel to it now. It was less angry and more like he was playing chess. "You're getting sloppy," he told the scarred fella. "Taking a hostage, making threats with all these witnesses. That ain't professional, that's just desperate." The scarred man's eyes got real narrow. "You watch your mouth, Crow." Elias shifted his weight, and Clara knew that stance. He was getting ready for a fight. "I'm just saying Peaton must not be paying you enough to risk a hanging," Elias went on. "Because that's what this is. Kidnapping a child. The territorial marshal will have to step in no matter how much money Peaton has." The rustler scoffed. "There won't be a marshal if there ain't no witnesses." But his voice wasn't as steady as before. "You plan on getting rid of everyone? The judge, his family, the ranch hands, the widow Morrison, and the boy?" Elias just shook his head. "That's a lot of folks, friend, a lot of questions. And questions lead to a noose. Is Peaton's money really worth that?" Clara saw what Elias was doing. He was planting seeds of doubt, turning the men against their boss. Another rustler spoke up, the nervous one from before. "He's right. This has gone too far. I signed on to move cattle, not to hurt some kid." The scarred leader snapped back. "Nobody's hurting anyone if they just do what I say." But his confidence was slipping. The nervous man pushed back. "What if Peaton decides we're loose ends? Once he has this land, what's to stop him from getting rid of us to cover his tracks?" The doubt was spreading now, and Clara could see it on their faces. They were realizing they were just pawns in a bigger game. "All of you shut up!" the scarred leader yelled. We stick to the plan. We get our money, and we ride out. It's simple. Nothing's simple when you're working for a man like Thomas Gaines, Elias said, his voice low and hard. A silence fell over the place. The scarred leader's face went pale, then red with rage. A few of the other men looked at each other, stunned. And in that moment, Clara understood. Elias knew that Piton was just a front for the railroad baron who had ruined his life. "How do you know that name?" the leader demanded. "Because me and Gaines, we have some history," Elias said, his voice cold as steel. "I know how he works. He uses folks up and throws them away like trash. You think Piton is any different? He's Gaines's man, doing Gaines's dirty work. And when this is all over, you'll all be loose ends he needs to tie off." The leader snarled. "You're lying." "Am I?" Elias took a step forward. "Then why didn't Piton ever tell you who he was really working for? You ain't partners to him. You're just tools. And when a tool breaks, you throw it away." The doubt was poison now, breaking the group apart. The scarred leader saw it too, and the fear made him reckless. "Enough!" he screamed. He yanked the boy closer, pushing the gun hard against his head. "I don't care about Gaines or Piton. I care about getting paid, so here's what's going to happen." He never got to finish. A rifle cracked from an upstairs window. The man holding the boy yelped and staggered back, his gun hand bleeding and useless. In that same second, Elias moved like lightning, bringing his own rifle up. He fired one smooth shot. The scarred leader's hat flew clean off his head. It was a warning, placed perfectly to show the next one wouldn't miss. "Let the boy go," Elias ordered, his voice deadly calm. "Now." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the rustler with the shot hand dropped his pistol. Thomas burst out of the barn and ran straight for the boy. The child stumbled free, and Thomas scooped him up and carried him to safety. The scarred leader's face was a mask of pure rage. "Get 'em! Get 'em all!" But his men were already breaking. The nervous one threw his gun down and put his hands up. Two others turned their horses and galloped off into the night. What came next was fast and mean. The few who stayed to fight were outmatched. Clara fired her rifle with a steady hand, making them duck for cover. Margaret's rifle kept talking from that upstairs window, and for a widow woman she shot with frightening accuracy. But it was Elias who ended it. He moved through the fight like a storm, disarming one man, shooting another's horse out from under him, and forcing a third to give up. He was a lawman again. The scarred leader, seeing it all fall apart, made one last desperate charge at the house with his gun blazing. He never made it. Judge Holden stepped out onto the porch with an old army revolver. He fired a single shot, and the rustler's horse collapsed, throwing its rider to the ground. The man reached for his gun, but found himself staring at a half-dozen rifles pointed right at him. "Don't," Elias said quietly. "It's over." The fight just drained out of the man. He slumped to the dirt and slowly raised his hands. Later, as they were tying up the prisoners, the reality of it all hit Clara like a wave. They had won, but it had been awfully close. "You did good," Elias said, coming up beside her. His voice was gentle. "That was true bravery." "I was scared the whole time," she admitted. "So was I," he said with a small smile. "But courage ain't about not being scared. It's about looking fear in the eye and doing what needs doing anyway." Thomas came over with the boy, who was now safe and sound. "He's all right, Miss Clara, just frightened." "Get him inside," Clara said. "Get him warm and fed. And someone needs to ride to town for the marshal." "About that," Judge Holden said, joining them. "We need to play this smart. These men work for Piton, but he'll deny everything. We need proof, something that ties him directly to all this." "The scarred one might talk," Elias suggested, "especially if he thinks it'll save his neck from a rope." They put the prisoners in the barn under guard. The scarred leader just sat there looking defeated. This man had threatened a child and tried to destroy everything she held dear. "What's your name?" she asked him. He just glared. Go to hell. That's not going to help you, Elias said, crouching down to look him in the eye. Right now, you're looking at charges for kidnapping, arson, and attempted murder. That's a rope, friend. Your only way out is to tell us everything you know about Peyton. I ain't telling you nothing, the man grumbled. Peyton will get me a lawyer. Will he? Elias asked softly. Or will he cut his losses and let you hang to protect himself? You're a loose end now. How much do you think your life is worth to him? Clara saw a flicker of doubt in the man's eyes and pressed on. He sent you here to do his dirty work. Now that you failed, you really think he's going to save you? He's probably getting his story straight right now. She leaned in. But if you testify against him, that shows cooperation. And that matters to a judge. My father is the judge in these parts, Judge Holden said, stepping forward. And I can promise you, how much you cooperate will decide how I feel about your sentence. The scarred man looked between all of them, the wheels turning in his head. Finally, he sagged. His name is Jonathan Peyton, he mumbled. But he works for Thomas Gaines, the railroad man. They want this whole valley for a new rail line. Peyton was supposed to buy up the land cheap any way he could. We know that part, Elias said. What we need is solid proof. Documents, letters, anything that ties Peyton to these attacks. The man hesitated, then gave up completely. There's a ledger. Peyton keeps it in his room at the hotel. It has everything. Every payment, every order, all of it. He's real careful with his money. Make sure Gaines ain't cheating him. Clara and Elias shared a look. A ledger was exactly what they needed to put Peyton away for good. Where is it? Clara asked. Hidden panel. Behind the mirror in his room, the scarred man grumbled. Saw him use it once. Thought I was too dumb to notice. Stupid enough to work for a snake who'd leave you to hang, Elias noted. But smart enough to cut a deal now. They left the prisoners tied up and gathered in the house. Margaret was giving the rescued boy some soup. He told them he'd been grabbed in town that afternoon, held as their backup plan. We need that ledger, Judge Holden said. It's the proof we need. I'll go, Elias said immediately. I can get in, get the book, and be gone before sunup. Not by yourself you won't, Clara stated, her voice firm. This is my fight too, Elias. Besides, you'll need a lookout. Clara's right, her father agreed, though he didn't like it. Two of you have a better chance, but you have to be careful. Peyton won't know a thing, Clara interrupted. He thinks his men are still out here. We have a few hours before anyone expects them back. They got ready in silence. Clara changed into dark, practical clothes. Elias checked his guns, then handed Clara a sheathed knife. Just in case, he said quietly. Better to have it and not need it, Clara finished, tying the knife to her belt. It felt heavy, a strange weight that reminded her how much she had changed. They rode hard for Copper Creek under a blanket of cold stars. The town was mostly dark and asleep. After tying the horses out of sight, they slipped around to the back of the hotel. His room is second floor, corner, Clara whispered. The back door was locked. Elias produced a thin strip of metal and had it open in seconds. Where did you learn that? A lawman learns a thing or two about how the other side thinks. They crept up the old stairs. At the top, Elias froze, holding up a hand. Voices. They came from Peyton's room. Pressing close to the door, they could hear every word. It should be over by now, Peyton said, sounding pleased with himself. With the judge's place in ashes, he will have to sell. We will own this whole valley in a month. Another voice, colder and unfamiliar, asked, And if he refuses? Then we arrange a little accident, Peyton replied. The daughter is a problem. A fall from a horse, maybe. Something tragic. Just a horse. Peyton's voice was cold and flat. He figured without an heir the courts would tie up the ranch, forcing her father to sell for pennies on the dollar. Clara felt a chill run deep in her bones. He was talking about ending her life like it was just another line item in a ledger. In the dark, Elias's hand found hers, a firm, silent promise to stay steady. A strange voice added, Gaines wants this done quietly. Peaton's reply was quick. And it will be. Once I have that book with our accounts, I will burn it. No proof, no trail. We will be ghosts. Clara and Elias exchanged a look. The proof. It would be gone by sunup. After a few more minutes of talk about railroads and profits, a tall, well-dressed man walked right past their hiding spot. That must be Gaines's man, Elias whispered. Which means Piton is alone. He eyed the door. I need you to cause a ruckus, something to draw him out. Clara's mind raced. A fire, she said. I will yell fire in the lobby. That will get everyone moving, including him. Perfect, Elias said. Give me 30 seconds after he leaves the room. I will be in and out before he knows what hit him. Clara went to the lobby and screamed, Fire! Fire in the kitchen! The hotel exploded into chaos. Doors flew open and sleepy folk stumbled into the hall. She heard Peaton's door open, his angry voice demanding to know what was happening. As he stomped down the stairs, she counted to 30, then called out again, False alarm, everybody! Just a candle fell over. It is all out now. A wave of grumbling filled the room. Peaton shot her a suspicious look, but she was already making apologies to the desk clerk. He muttered something about hysterical women and stomped back to his room. Clara waited until his door clicked shut, then she went upstairs. Elias stepped out from the shadows, a leather-bound book tucked under his coat. His face was grim. Got it. Let's ride. They did not speak again until the town was a distant memory. By moonlight, Elias opened the book. It was all there. Every crooked deal, every bribe, all in Peaton's own handwriting. And at the very back, a letter from Thomas Gaines himself, laying out the whole conspiracy. This is it, Clara breathed. This is everything. We have to move fast, Elias said, closing the ledger. Once Piton finds this is gone, he will run. They reached the ranch just as the sky began to lighten. Judge Holden was waiting on the porch, his face a mask of worry. Did you get it? Clara held up the book. We have him, Father. We have them all. The judge took the ledger, his hands shaking with rage as he turned the pages. This is conspiracy. This is fraud. This is a hanging offense. Piton will swing for this. And Gaines, well, this will ruin him. What now? Clara asked. Now, the judge said, his voice hard as steel. We send riders to every lawman within 100 miles. We arrest Piton before the sun is high. But Elias was staring off at the horizon, his face troubled. This is not over. Gaines is still out there. Men like him do not forgive being made a fool of. Clara felt a chill. You think he will retaliate? I think he will try, Elias said. Then we will face him, Clara said firmly. The same way we have faced everything else. Together. At that moment, Margaret came out of the house. The boy's parents are here. The reunion in the parlor was full of tears and joy, a powerful reminder of what they were truly fighting to protect. By midday, word came back from town. Piton had been arrested while trying to flee. The evidence in the ledger was too strong to deny. The marshal, a tough old man named Carson who had ridden for 2 days straight, laid it out plain. Peaton will try to blame Gaines, he said, but Gaines has powerful friends. Getting justice against him will be a harder fight. One battle at a time, Elias said quietly. But Clara could see the weight he carried in his eyes. She took his hand, her fingers lacing with his. Whatever comes, she said softly, we face it together. You are not alone anymore, Elias. You can stop running. He looked down at her, and for the first time she saw the last wall around his heart finally start to crumble. I am tired of running, he admitted, tired of always looking over my shoulder. Then stop, she said. Stay here. Build a life with me. He pulled her close, holding her as if she were the answer to a prayer he had been afraid to speak. I love you, Elias Crow, she whispered. The only question is whether you are brave enough to let me." He did not need to answer. He just held her tighter, finally home. "I love you too," he said into her hair. "And I am brave enough for you, and for all of this." Life on the ranch was pushing forward. You could hear the hammers and see folks choosing to build again right in the face of danger. This was the frontier, after all, raw and unforgiving. And Clara had found her footing right in the middle of it, not by shrinking down, but by standing tall next to a man who saw her fire as a blessing, not a curse. The trouble with Thomas Gaines was far from over. There were more fights on the horizon. But in Elias's arms, Clara felt a certainty settle in her bones. Whatever came next, she would not be alone. 2 weeks went by in a haze of work and watchful hope. Peyton was locked up in the territorial jail, his threats growing thinner by the day as the case against him became ironclad. The rustlers who had survived turned on each other, each one talking to save his own skin. But Elias was still on edge, and Clara knew why. Thomas Gaines had gone silent. Word was he had pulled out of Montana completely. To most, it looked like a win, but Elias knew better. "Men like Gaines do not just give up," he told Clara one evening, riding the fence line. "They fall back, and they plan. His quiet worries me more than his racket ever did." "No," Elias said, pulling his horse to a stop and looking at the mountains. "We take the fight to him. We drag him into the light so he cannot hide in the shadows anymore." Clara watched the hard line of his jaw. "You mean to go after him yourself? To finish what you started 3 years ago?" "I mean to end this for good," he said, turning to face her. "But that means going to Kansas, to his home turf. It means I could get arrested for murders I never committed." "Then we go together," Clara said plainly. "You and me. We will face him together." "Clara, I cannot ask that of you." "You are not asking. I am telling you." She nudged her horse closer. "Elias, we are past the point of you trying to protect me by leaving me behind. No more running. We confront Gaines, clear your name, and come home." The argument was short and hot. He pointed out every danger, every way it could go wrong. She met each point with a steady resolve. Finally, he gave in. "You are the most infuriating woman I've ever met," he said. "And you love me for it." "Against my better judgment, yes, I do." They took their plan to Judge Holden that evening. Catherine and Margaret were there too. "Absolutely not," the judge said right away. "It is a trap. That man has hired guns and connections." "That is why we go now," Elias argued. "He's expecting us to wait here like sitting ducks. Instead, we hit him first." "With what evidence?" Judge Holden challenged. "What proof could possibly hold up in a Kansas court?" Peyton's ledger points to Gaines, certainly, but any decent lawyer would call it hearsay. They would argue Gaines knew nothing about it. Elias leaned in, his voice low and steady. "Then we find better proof. Gaines is just as meticulous as Peyton. He keeps his own records to protect himself from betrayal. We locate those records, give them to the right people, and we take him down for good." "And how do you plan on doing that?" the judge asked, his voice full of doubt. "Break into his properties?" "If we must," Elias answered. Until that moment, Catherine Holden had been a silent observer. Now she spoke with a quiet force that silenced the room. "Marcus, they will go after him with or without our blessing. The only question is if we help them go prepared." Everyone turned to look at her. Clara's mother was known for her gentle nature, but her voice now held a surprising strength. "Catherine, this man is a danger to our entire valley," she continued. "He is hunting the good man our daughter loves. We cannot just sit here and hope this storm passes." She walked to Clara's side, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I have watched our daughter become a woman who fights for what is right. I will not ask her to cower now." Margaret spoke up in support. "Catherine is right. Hiding and praying does not stop men like Gaines. I learned that the hard way. You must face them head on." Judge Holden looked from the determined faces of the women to the resolute gaze of Elias. Then Clara saw her father finally accept what had to be done. "All right," he sighed. "But if we are doing this, we do it by the book. I will use my connections in Kansas to set up meetings with judges and marshals I trust. But you must promise me you will take no foolish risks." "We promise," Clara said, even though she knew the entire venture was a risk. The following 3 days were a flurry of activity. The judge sent out telegrams. Elias taught Clara about gathering evidence, and Margaret helped her find clothes suitable for moving in polite society. The night before their departure, Clara examined her reflection. The rugged frontier girl was gone. In her place was a woman in a deep green traveling dress looking both respectable and strong. Her hair was pinned neatly, a stark contrast to her usual windswept look. A soft knock at the door broke her thoughts. Her father entered, a small leather case in his hand. "This was your grandmother's," he said quietly. Clara opened it to reveal a beautiful silver locket. Inside were 2 small photos, one of a young woman who looked just like Clara, and the other of a man in frontier gear. "Everyone said she was too wild to survive out here," her father confessed. "They said she needed society to tame her, but she built a life on her own terms. She raised me by herself after my father passed. She taught me to stand for what is right and never back down." "But you told me she died alone," Clara said, her brow furrowed in confusion. "I told you the version of her story that I was afraid of," he admitted. "I feared her independence led to loneliness." He gently touched the locket. "The truth is, she died on the land she fought for, surrounded by people who loved her. She died free and happy, Clara. I was too young and scared to see her life as something to admire instead of something to fear." "Why are you telling me this now?" Clara asked, tears welling in her eyes. "Because I see her spirit in you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I see that same fire. I have spent your life trying to keep you from being like her when I should have been celebrating it. I am sorry, Clara. I am sorry for not seeing that your strength is a gift." "Go with Elias," her father urged, pulling her into a hug. "Clear his name and build a life. But please come back to us." "I will," she promised. "We both will." They set out at dawn, riding toward Kansas. With every mile that passed, the danger grew, but Clara felt only a steely resolve. As they traveled, the tall mountains gave way to open plains. In town after town, they heard the same heartbreaking stories of families ruined by Thomas Gaines. His empire, they learned, was built upon decades of suffering. In a small town in Nebraska, they found a woman named Sarah. 5 years ago, Gaines's men had taken her farm and her husband's life, leaving her with nothing. "He is untouchable," she said, her voice filled with bitterness. "Everyone knows what he does, but the law is afraid of him." "The law will touch him," Elias promised her gently. "I give you my word." 3 weeks later, they arrived in Dodge City. The town was bigger and busier than Elias remembered from his days as a marshal. "I was young then," he recalled, pointing to his old office. "I thought I could fix the world with a fast draw. It took me a long time to learn some fights are not won with a gun." "But some are," Clara added. "You taught me that." They met with the men Judge Holden had recommended. All were wary. They knew of Gaines's corruption, but warned that he was clever and well protected. One man, however, was different. A federal marshal named William Garrett had been building a case against Gaines for years. "I have witnesses and proof of fraud," Garrett told them, "but I am missing the final piece. Gaines keeps a master ledger, a detailed record of every crime. It is his insurance, but it is also the one thing that can bring him down for good." "So where is this ledger?" Elias asked. Garrett shook his head. "That is the question, is not it? I have had my people searching for 3 years. He looked them over. "Y'all are either mighty brave or plain foolish. Gaines has this town watched. He will know you are here by tomorrow if he does not already." "Good," Clara said, surprising them both. "Let him know. Let him worry about what we are planning." Garrett's eyes sharpened. "You want to flush him out?" "I want him to make a mistake. He is comfortable right now, but if he sees us as a real threat, he will act. When he does, he will expose himself." Their plan was simple. They would make their presence known, asking questions about Gaines all over town. They would force him to send his men to stop them, and they would be ready. Judge Holden's letters opened doors. The territorial governor, worried about Gaines, even provided protection. Local businessmen, long intimidated, began to find their courage. The pressure on Thomas Gaines was building. The response came 2 weeks later. As Clara and Elias left a newspaper office, 3 well-dressed men blocked their path. These were professional guns for hire. "Mr. Gaines would like a word," the leader said politely. "And if we decline—" Elias's hand drifted toward his gun. "Then we must insist." The politeness was a thin mask over a clear threat. Clara and Elias exchanged a look. This was the moment. "All right," Elias said. "We will go, but we go armed. And you tell him we are not afraid of him." "I will tell him." They were led to the grandest house in Dodge City, a mansion built to show off its owner's wealth. Inside, everything was lavish and expensive. They were brought into a study filled with books and hunting trophies. Behind a giant desk sat Thomas Gaines. He was older than Clara had figured, maybe 60, with silver hair and a face that could turn from kind to cruel in a heartbeat. Right then, he just looked curious. "Mr. Crow," he said in a pleasant voice, "it has been a long time. And you must be Miss Holden. I have heard about you." "Mr. Gaines," Elias replied, his voice steady. "I would say it is a pleasure, but we both know that would be a lie." Gaines actually smiled. "Direct. I can appreciate that. Please sit down. We have a lot to talk about." They sat, but Clara felt a need to be ready to spring up at any moment. Gaines poured himself a whiskey, but did not offer them any. "You have been causing me a great deal of trouble," he said, like he was talking about the weather. "Petton is in jail. My plans in Montana are stopped. Federal marshals are asking questions." He looked at them. "You are quite bold for a wanted murderer and a rancher's daughter." "I am not a murderer," Elias said softly. "You killed those people. You set me up for it." "Prove it," Gaines said with a cold smile. "Oh, that is right. You cannot. I was careful, and you were a perfect scapegoat. A righteous marshal who was too good for his own good." Clara felt a hot rage build inside her, but she pushed it down. They needed him to keep talking. "Why did you bring us here?" she asked. "To make you an offer. A very generous one." Gaines leaned forward on his desk. "I know your father has a large ranch. It is prime land the railroad would love. I am willing to pay 3 times what it is worth. Enough money for you both to disappear and live comfortably for the rest of your lives. A new start far away from here." "In exchange for what?" Elias asked. Elias already knew the answer. "In exchange for you both disappearing for good. The investigation stops, the questions stop, and you live out your lives in peace." Gaines spread his hands wide. "It is a fine deal, Mr. Crow. Better than any other you will find. And if we refuse, then things will get unpleasant for you, for Judge Holden, for everyone you care about." The friendly act was gone, and the monster was looking right at them. "I have spent 30 years building this empire. I have crushed men far better than you. What makes you think you can win?" Clara stood up, pulling Elias with her. "Because we are not playing your game. We are changing the rules." They turned and walked out, leaving Gaines staring after them. Outside, Marshal Garrett was waiting with a dozen armed men. "Well?" he asked. "He is rattled," Elias said. "He is making offers and threats. That means he is worried." "Good," Garrett said with a look of triumph. "Because while y'all were in there, my men found something. Gaines has a private office in the railroad building. It is separate from his main business with heavy security. That is where he would hide something important." "Can you get a warrant?" Clara asked. "Already got one. The judge signed it an hour ago." Garrett motioned to his men. "We are going in tonight, fast and hard, before he can get rid of any evidence." The raid went down at midnight. Garrett and his men stormed the building, quickly taking care of the guards. Clara and Elias waited outside, the tension thick in the air. An hour later, Garrett came out holding a metal box. "Found it in a safe under the floorboards," he said. They all gathered back in Garrett's office. A locksmith worked on the box until it finally clicked open. Inside was exactly what they had been hoping for: a ledger. This ledger was even more detailed than Petton's. It was a record of 30 years of crime, bribery, fraud, and murder. It even included the killings Elias had been framed for, with notes in Gaines's own handwriting about setting up the marshal. "This is it," Garrett whispered. "This is everything." They arrested Gaines at dawn. This time there were no polite requests. Federal marshals surrounded his mansion and took him away in chains. He screamed threats and demanded a lawyer, but it was over. The evidence was undeniable. His entire empire fell apart like a house of cards. Within weeks, judges, politicians, and gunmen he had paid off were all arrested, too. 2 weeks later, Elias's name was officially cleared. A federal judge declared him innocent of all charges and gave him a formal apology. 3 years of running and hiding were finally over. Clara watched Elias read the paper that gave him his life back. She could see the heavy weight lift right off his shoulders. He looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "It is over," he said, his voice full of wonder. "It is really over." "Yes," she said, taking his hands in hers. "Now we can go home." They got back to Montana on a beautiful spring morning. The ranch looked greener than ever under a clear blue sky. Judge Holden and Catherine were waiting for them on the porch. The long hug that followed was filled with 3 years of worry and hope. "You did it," the judge said, his voice thick with emotion. "We did it," Elias corrected him. "All of us together." Margaret had rebuilt her house with help from her neighbors. She threw a big dinner for everyone, and it felt like the whole community was healing together. As the evening ended, Clara and Elias walked outside to watch the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "I want to marry you," Elias said suddenly. "Right here on this land, with our family and friends watching. I want to build a real life with you, Clara Holden. No more running. Just living." Clara turned to him, her heart so full it felt like it would burst. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes. I do not have much to offer you," he said. "No fortune, no big house. You have yourself. That is all I have ever wanted." She touched his face. "You see me as your equal. You let me be exactly who I am, and you stand right beside me. That is worth more than all the money in the world." "I love you," he said simply. "Everything you are and everything you will be." They were married 3 weeks later, under that same big Montana sky. It was a simple wedding with just family and close friends. Judge Holden officiated with tears in his eyes. When the judge pronounced them married, and Elias kissed her, Clara felt like the world had finally clicked into place. People had always told her she was too much, too wild, too independent. But in Elias's arms, she knew the truth. She was not too much. She was exactly enough. And she had found the man who knew it too. The party was a happy, chaotic celebration with music and dancing. Billy cried about how beautiful it all was. Thomas gave a speech about courage and partnership. Margaret gave Clara a quilt she had made with every stitch a prayer for their future, to start their life. As the celebration at the ranch continued late into the night, Clara and Elias walked to a quiet ridge overlooking the valley. Below them, the lights of their home twinkled in the darkness. "Do you think it will always be this hard?" Clara asked, leaning against her husband. "Fighting for what is ours, for what is right." "Probably," Elias said honestly. "The world does not change easily. There will always be men like Gaines and battles that need to be fought." "It is a good thing we are both so stubborn," she said with a smile. He laughed, a warm and happy sound. "It is a very good thing." They stood together as the stars filled the vast Montana sky. Clara thought about the long journey that brought her to this perfect moment with this man in this life. "What are you thinking about?" Elias asked softly. "I am thinking that my father was wrong about me," Clara said, a gentle smile on her face. "I was not too wild for marriage. I was just waiting for the right one. A marriage where I could be exactly who I am." "And have you found it?" he asked. Yes, she said, turning to look up at him. She saw in his eyes the man who had saved her life and captured her heart. Yes, I have. Hand in hand, they walked back down to the ranch. Their future was unwritten, full of challenges and boundless possibilities. They would build their home together. They would face any threat that came their way. They were two strong-willed people who had finally found their perfect match on the rugged Montana frontier. It proved that a true partnership was not about one person taming the other. It was about two people standing shoulder to shoulder, making each other stronger, and facing the world as equals. Folks had called Clara Holden, now Clara Crow, too wild for her whole life. But standing there with her husband, with their future stretching out wide and clear as the Montana sky, she finally understood the truth. She was not wild, she was free, and that made all the difference in the world. As the lights of the ranch house burned against the dark, two people who had fought for the right to love each other walked toward their future together. It was everything Clara never knew she wanted, and it was perfect. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.